The first leg semi-final tie between PSG and Bayern Munich featured 34 attempted dribbles. That is double the amount that featured in the game between Atletico and Arsenal, and this points directly to a wider issue in the modern game. The contrast in tactical style between these two games was there for everyone to see. In one game, the players were in control, constantly taking on the defender and looking to win their individual battles. In the other game, the managers were the ones making the call. More tactical setups, more positional control, and less risk-taking. The end result, as far as these managers are concerned, is exactly the same. All four are fighting for a spot in the Champions League final, so why should they care about how they achieve this? But from a viewer's perspective, there is absolutely no doubt which game we all preferred watching. And this is where the broader issues start to emerge. Because if you watch most games today, something feels off. Wingers rarely take on their man. Possession is slower and more controlled, and there's a growing focus on structure and doing statistically the best thing, which is exactly what we saw in the Atletico v Arsenal semi-final. The game has essentially become increasingly optimized by the coaches, where the system is the most important thing and the players just operate within it. So the PSG vs Bayern game felt like the perfect answer to all of this. This game wasn't about how one manager tactically outsmarted the other, or attacking shapes or defensive structures. It was all about the players. Under Luis Enrique and Vincent Kompany, the structure is still there for everyone to see, but it serves a completely different purpose to what we saw in the other semi-final. And it's not based on trying to control every single phase of play, it's built on trying to get the players into the position where they can then take over. To highlight this contrast, I'm going to focus on one clear tactical difference that emerged between these two games, and that is how these managers approach 1v1 situations. Then at the end of the video, we'll answer why this is so important for the modern game. Now I feel like I can already predict the type of comment that I'm going to receive on this video, stating how it completely depends on the players you have at your disposal, and I do somewhat agree with this statement. But before we even break down the individual tactical differences, I want you to answer this question honestly for me in the comments down below. If, for example, Elise played for Arsenal, would he be the same player he is today? Let me know in the comments, but let's start by breaking down how Luis Enrique and Vincent Kompany approach 1v1 situations. It's not difficult to see what makes players like Elise, Diaz, Kvaratskhelia or Doué so dangerous. But what stands out in this semi-final is how deliberately both Luis Enrique and Vincent Kompany engineered the conditions for these players to receive the ball in situations where the individual quality can actually decide the game. In fact, on FOTMob we can see how every attacking player had a clear focus on taking on their man, consistently attempting dribbles on the flank and producing some unique heat maps thanks to their constant rotation. I encourage you to check out these stats for yourself on the FOTMob app just to get the full picture of what happened in this game. You can download the app completely for free using my link in the description or pinned comment down below. In both cases, everything starts with width, as wingers hold extremely wide positions, and more importantly are constantly working right on the defensive line. This may seem like a subtle detail that we've come to expect, but it makes all the difference in setting up the right situation for the player. However, just simply having players out wide is not enough for this to create any dangerous opportunities, as it would be pretty easy for one of the centre-backs to shift over to make it a 2v1. So the players need support. When it comes to PSG, this support often comes from Dembele and one extra player pushing forward, which could be someone like Zaire-Emery, Neves or one of the two fullbacks. There are multiple examples of this structure from PSG, with no one in the centre but two players on each side of the pitch, meaning when the ball goes out wide, it's a 1v1. And there are instantly a lot of different options available to these players. Take for example Kvara's goal to make it 1-1. The move develops slowly from right to left, and in this case Doué has shifted to the left flank and Hakimi is stretching the pitch on the right. So we can clearly see this 2-2 shape in attack. The ball is played forward into Doué, and with Kvara running into the space behind Stanisic, PSG have created the perfect 1v1 situation, where the individual quality of Kvara can emerge. So the main idea is that the player hugging the touchline always has at least one player circulating and giving support. This player doesn't even necessarily have to be involved, but just by being active on this flank can help create dangerous opportunities, which is what we saw in PSG's goal to make it 4-2. There's a similar structure with two players hugging the touchline. In this case on the right, Doué makes a run towards the ball, dragging away Lima from the defensive line and giving Hakimi the trigger to run into the space on the flank. But at the other end of the pitch, Elise and Luis Diaz were just as dangerous, if not more dangerous, than their respective counterparts, and were the key focal point behind every Bayern attack. But when it comes to creating 1v1 situations, Bayern are more focused on completely isolating this player as much as possible. There's an inherent difference in how both teams would progress the ball. PSG were more focused on circulating from flank to flank, so there was more time for the whole team to shift from one side to the other. While with Bayern, most of their attacks were coming from long diagonals and switches in play. Also thanks to players like Harry Kane dropping off the defensive line and receiving the ball. This meant that when the wingers received the ball, they might not have had instant support, but because the rest of the team has dragged away defenders, they have more space to push forward and attack. Take for example this move here. Bayern moved the ball forward to Elise, and rather than the whole team shifting over to give support, they drag away the rest of the players, so Elise has space to push forward. And it's a similar scenario when Bayern moved the ball over to Luis Diaz, usually finding himself as the only player out wide and with space to attack. Obviously, the wingers are not isolated for the whole move, and eventually they will be joined by overlapping runs from the fullbacks or someone like Musiala in the half space. So there are subtle differences in how each team reaches this position out wide, and the manager has an input up to this point. But what happens from here is completely down to the players' decisions. Now let's see for example what happened in the other semi-final. In the first few minutes of the game, Madueke dribbled brilliantly between the two Atletico defenders and set up a great opportunity for his teammates. And after that moment, he basically never attempted to do this again. Even though the setup might be relatively similar to what we saw with PSG and Bayern, with two players hugging the touchline as much as possible, once the ball reached this position, there was rarely any clear intent to take on the defender. There were few supporting runs ahead of the ball, and the vast majority of the time, the ball would circulate back to the centre-backs and to the other flank, where the same pattern would repeat with Martinelli. This certainly gives Arsenal control and allows them to dictate the tempo, but it doesn't give the players the freedom to try something different. Even with the introduction of Saka, we only saw him take on his man once, and he was successful. The rest of the time, the ball would go back and they would wait for the right moment to strike. If this was directly leading to extremely dangerous goal-scoring opportunities, then you could certainly justify Arteta's decision to do this in this position on the pitch. However, the result was rarely an actual goal-scoring opportunity. The ball would circulate from one side to the other and eventually would either go out of play or would be a hopeful cross into the box. So it's not like there was a specific alternative that was better than taking on the defender. And when they did take on the defender, it led to some really dangerous opportunities. When it comes to Atletico, the situation was much different. Again, there was no clear focus on setting up these situations, and when they did have the ball in positions where the players could try something different, they would look for passing combinations and 1-2s on the edge of the box to try and break forward like that. This is also down to their playstyle, with Lookman being more central and the fullback overlapping on the flank. So with players like Griezmann, Alvarez and Lookman in a central position, passing combinations and fast counter-attacking football were the priority. The contrast between these two games is not necessarily about which style is better and more effective, but is more focused on who is actually responsible for the outcome in the game. In one game, the structure was used to get the players into a dangerous position and then let them do the rest. While in the other semi-final, the structure remains in control throughout the move, dictating when and how these moments can happen, often delaying them to the point where the advantage completely disappears. And this is why, to me, the game between PSG and Bayern felt so different and important given the current tactical landscape. Because under Luis Enrique and Vincent Kompany, the system is perfectly crafted for the players. The system is still there, but the players have more input, which is ultimately what brings unpredictability, speed, and entertainment back into the game. On the other end of the spectrum, when you have a manager dictating every single aspect of the game, it becomes all about minimizing risk and maximizing efficiency. Ultimately, which approach is better will be decided by who lifts the trophy. But in terms of what the game looks like and what fans connect with, I think we all know what we would prefer to watch. Thanks for watching.